It's for the province of Manitoba, it's for the Conservative government, and it's for municipalities who use and abuse taxpayers' funding. Why would you pay $100,000 a year to put one First Nation man in jail when you could spend $60,000 to give him a university degree? That's not just lack of accountability, that's corruption and illegal, because they use the money that they save to go travel overseas, to travel in jets to get to their fishing lodges. That's corruption. So I think the legislation isn't needed for First Nations, it's needed for the governing system that's here.
So when people ask you a question about Chief Spence, and you see, you know, on the media the corruption being or alleged, what do you say about that?
Here's the facts. The facts are, take all the political rhetoric away, what she did or what she didn't do, and just look at the numbers. And the numbers show that since Chief Spence became chief, the financial reporting requirements actually improved dramatically under her chieftainship. When people say, where did the $9 million go? I'll tell you where it went. To housing, education, social assistance, infrastructure, band support funding. That's where the money goes. But people have no context, so you can throw at a number like 90 million and say, where did the 90 million go? Well, over how many years? And for what programs and services? And that $90 million actually represents funding that is far below provincial levels for the exact same services, anywhere between 20 and 75%. So I'm asking, where's all the Canadian money going that they can't provide equal transfer payments to First Nations that they do to provincial residents? And if you think about the funding that's appropriated by Parliament, roughly $9 billion, that's what the province of New Brunswick gets. And there isn't a single person saying, what's New Brunswick doing with all of its money? But for First Nations, what are you guys spending it on? I see you have a truck. That's the reason why your community members don't have a house. They have double standards that aren't required in Canadian governments that they have in First Nations. How could anyone come to Chief Dumas and say, Chief Dumas, how could you live in a free house when your community members don't have a free house? Anyone ever see the house Harper lives in? It's a mansion, and it's paid for by taxpayers. Yet the homelessness in this country for Canadians is on the rise. Why doesn't the standard not apply to him? Why can he not live without a house and a salary until all people in Canada have a house? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about accountability. And going back to Chief Spence, she had audited financial statements every year for those $90 million, and all of those audits were unqualified audits. And for anyone who doesn't know what that means, it means there's no problem with her finances. When the government put her into third-party management, alleging she was corrupt, the court found that that was illegal. They had no grounds to put her into third-party management because she didn't do anything wrong with her funding. That's my answer to the Chief Spence question.
Go ahead, Kayla.
So you know how you were talking about earlier about you need better education? We need better education. They use their own "your" on that sign. It says "you are mother does not work here." That sign over there. Oh!
Woo! Way to go, Kayla.
We'll let Murray know.
Kayla. You sound like Tristan.
You sound like my kids.
Does somebody want to say? Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you very much for what you said. I was trying to take notes of all that legislation. So I have two questions. Is there a copy of that anywhere?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will give it to whoever the organizer is, and you can contact her and she'll give it out to whoever
Wonderful.
wants
Thank
it.
you very much. My other question has to do also about getting accurate information. And when that whole news feeding frenzy, sorry, you see the editor? You didn't engage in it, I don't think. Came out about the monies that Wampscat received and that big audit.
Yeah.
All of our national media outlets, as far as I was able to determine, misrepresented what it was
Yes,
and did nothing to provide background or clarity.
exactly.
And one of my major concerns, and I think it should be a concern for everybody, is knowing how to get accurate information and disseminate it. And plus, how to assess what's accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, when Chief Spence started her hunger strike, Oliver, what's his name? Cliff Oliver from CTV?
Craig Oliver?
Craig Oliver, CTV. I have never heard such
Vile.
foaming at the mouth.
Yeah.
We should get better than that.
Yeah. Really good points, because I've given you a really hard job. I've said go learn about First Nations issues, and you have a daunting task. It's overwhelming because it's all of the issues, especially if you don't have a background in the midst of media propaganda. How do you know what to look at and what you don't? Most people tell me it's overwhelming. And it seems unfair that I'm asking you to do this. But think about it this way. It seems overwhelming to have to learn all this stuff and figure it all out. Imagine how overwhelming it is for First Nations to live it every single day. And that we're constantly being required to educate everybody else. Well, you tell me why I should do this, and you tell me why your treaty rights are still protected, and you tell me, and we're constantly having to do that. So what I'm doing is, I'm doing it the best I can, and many of us are trying to educate people as best we can, but I tell my students, just critically assess everything you hear. First of all, don't trust the media. They're not fact-based reporters anymore. Is evil, that there's bad people there. What I'm saying is that in the old days, media used to report facts, and then they would leave it to the viewers or the listeners to come to their own conclusions. Newspapers would have like one opinion article. Today, when you see a political panel on TV, they have all reporters sitting there. So everything you get is opinion today instead of facts, because it's flashier and it causes more drama. But there are sources, and if you don't know, you can ask. So if you think about the kinds of bias that's there, watch APTN once in a while and see what they're reporting on and what they're saying. Engage in social media, Facebook and Twitter, because what we do, people like us on social media, we don't put rhetoric out there. What we do is we attach copies of Auditor General's reports, which say, when Canada testified before Parliament that it increased the housing stock for First Nations by 60%, not only did it not increase by 60%, but they lied to Parliament and decreased the housing stock by 30%. You know, that's Canada's Auditor General calling Canada out for its lies and failure to account. Those reports are readily available. It's hard to know where to actually get them. Social media will do that. Universities will do that. First Nation organizations, contact the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. You have a question? Contact them and say, hey, listen, there's all this going on about, you know, Attawapiskat. What's happening? What's the real scoop? They give press releases every day. Monitor websites on all this information. It's all there. And if you don't know, you know, just keep asking until you find it. And Google it too, right? There's lots of videos and information. And just don't Google me.
Excuse me, can I show you a letter? It's a problem, you know, I had a little bit of problem with it. You know, that's from the Manitoba Human Rights. That's from Musqueam.
Okay.
I had a problem in Musqueam, and I phoned Manitoba Human Rights, and I talked to the people in Nelson that looked after Musqueam.
Okay.
And they said they wouldn't do nothing about it, and they said they couldn't do the guy that I talked to, he said, I tried Manitoba Human Rights, and I couldn't believe him, and I tried. I didn't go to school myself, but I tried. I got through, right?
Well, what they're saying here is that they're going to investigate it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, that's yeah. But you know, I had a problem when it first started. I had a problem with this. You know, there was a lot of the cotton saucers that came there. There was a lot of prejudice going on. there, right? Well, Chief Primrose told me, he said, when I first started my hunger strike, he said, you can't do it here. He said, at the Banff, that's on the 17th, on the 17th I started, I went to the Banff on the 17th. And he told me, he phoned me, he said, you can't do it, he said, it's a public place. He said, you're taking people hostage, he sounded like that, eh? My own leader is trying to call me a terrorist now. There was no support there. And one counselor told me, he said, what are you doing? He said, no. He said, what are you doing to NCN? He said, excuse my language, you're buggering up the NCN. I said, excuse me, and I told him, I said, I'm not the first asshole to fuck up NCN, I told him. Excuse my language, I have to say it. So, that's what I'm doing.
Well, they're investigating it now.
Yeah, I know they're investigating it, but I'm going to finish it.
Okay. Is there something I can do to support you?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you to support me.
Okay.
To continue on with this thing.
Okay.
All the guys' support, I wouldn't mind. I can't walk alone,
Yeah, no, none of us are walking alone anymore. Don't forget your letter.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for 2 more questions, and then we're going to open it up for some more guest speakers, so go ahead.
I'm Alexander Ashton. I'm the chair of the school board here. I guess I was raised in a family where we learned lots of languages. My sister knows 7 or 8, she's a smart one. I know 4. One big thing that I'd like to see, and I think really doesn't exist at all, is funding for Aboriginal languages, but structured and protected. So for example, you get and this is coming from a municipal perspective, you have people federally paid 6-figure salaries to promote English and French. I didn't even know that you needed that. And you have regulated and protected funding per pupil for things like English as a second language. None of that exists municipally, so in an urban environment, for Aboriginal languages. And I'm talking completely distinct from, obviously, reserves, which are funded federally. Provincially, my school board is funded just tiny, 0.02% federally. So it is incredibly difficult to actually try and protect languages, which are a challenge on reserve, off reserve, when there's literally no, there's grants, there's a lot of people working really hard, extremely hard, doing multiple times their job, but there's just no protected funding. And I think it's not only, I'm picking on language because it's so clear cut, but when you don't really want to support teaching a language, well, what are you really supporting teaching? If you fail quite badly in one area, well, that doesn't mean that you get an A+ everywhere else, right? So it's something that and to put it bluntly, we only started having these discussions a couple months ago. To put it bluntly, First Nation languages they're Xeno, they're alien languages. If you look at them legally through Canada, they're not. If you look at it from a legal perspective, they're not Canadian languages. So I guess I would like to know how we can fix that.
Well, things like residential schools and chronic underfunding of First Nations has ensured that 57 of the 60 Indigenous languages that do exist in this country are at threat of near extinction, in the immediate future. Only 3 of them are not at risk. But that's not something that's a legacy just of the residential schools days, because there are people who speak our languages and who could teach languages. What happened was when Prime Minister stood up in Parliament and apologized to all Canadians, on behalf of all Canadians, for the atrocities in residential schools, for the loss of languages and culture that happened in residential schools, within a month he cut all the funding for Indigenous languages.
Shame.
That's a lack of accountability. That's not an apology. That's not moving the relationship forward. Even kids know. What do you do when you apologize? If you do something wrong, you don't just go up to someone and say sorry. What does that mean? It means nothing. You say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that again, and here's how I will make amends to you. That's what an apology is. All we got were empty words, and they weren't even freely given. It was because it was forced in a litigation settlement. That's why we still have a problem with Indigenous languages. And it would take a fraction of a percent of a mining company's profits to fund Indigenous languages indefinitely. Why don't we do that? Right? That's corporate social responsibility. You know, not building fake lakes and having fancy retreats. Corporate social responsibility is paying back and being thankful for the wealth that all Canadians and these corporations have because of our dispossession. And it wouldn't inconvenience anyone at all to deal with Indigenous languages. And nor is the provinces stopped from sharing some of the money they get from mining and other resources to contribute to Indigenous languages. They'll argue they don't have jurisdiction, but you don't need jurisdiction to do the right thing. Right? You don't need to legislate it.
We have time for one more question. Does anybody want to comment or?
I have a question.
Uh-oh.
When's your next trip?